Except for today, it's different because it's not a fantasy. This is my real life.
In the Netflix original To All the Boys I've Loved Before, we fell in love with Lara Jean and her insatiable teenage hormones. In the sequel, P.S. I Still Love You, the romantic teen comedy levels up in maturity as we follow our favorite characters into a brand new year at high school. This time around, Lara Jean and Peter are no longer pretending to be a couple, and everything seems picture perfect. That is, until an old flame comes back into the picture and chaos ensues.
And I'm gonna need that letter back.
Why?
Oh, I wrote it a long time ago and I don't necessarily remember what I said, so I guess I just want to know how mortified I should be.
Today we'll be taking a closer look at the film and we'll be pointing out 10 things that you might have missed. Throwbacks. We think that the reason why To All the Boys I've Loved Before is one of Netflix's most viewed original films ever is because it plays with nostalgia throughout the film. The first movie follows a classic story of a misfit love and what happens when a jock falls in love with a wallflower. While watching this tale as old as time, we couldn't help but think that we'd found ourselves in a modern version of a John Hughes movie. In P.S. I Still Love You, the film opens with Lara Jean dancing around her room to the song Then He Kissed Me by the Crystals. Not exactly a modern day top 40 hit you would think a teenager would be listening to, right? It seems as though Lara Jean is a romantic as we watch she proceeds to engage in classic rom-com tropes, like playing dress-up, dancing with her boyfriend's frame photo, then finally falling onto the bed, totally overcome with love. This scene brings to mind multiple movies such as The Breakfast Club, Grease, and Pretty in Pink, all of which feature scenes where young women use their bedrooms as their personal stage. When Lara Jean's little sister interrupts, saying, "This is not the time to be fantasizing about living in an 80s movie," we are convinced that our theory holds weight. The Hills Are Alive. Another moment in the opening scene that we think is worth mentioning is when Lara Jean puts the curtain over her head like a bride. Does this action look familiar to anyone? If you can't put your finger on it, we'll help you out. In The Sound of Music, when Maria is feeling inspired to assimilate into the Fontentrapp family, she takes the curtain into her hands and drapes it over her head in the exact same manner. If you can see it side by side, it's almost uncanny. We believe that this was no accident and that the director wanted to pepper in yet another nod to another iconic movie. Though in The Sound of Music, Maria goes on to make drapes into clothing for the children, we are pretty sure Lara Jean isn't that crafty. A similarity between these two characters, however, is that they have both gone through hardships before this point and are in a period of inspiration and forward movement. We think in both films, the playfulness with the curtain symbolizes joy, hope, and reinvigoration. Adventures in Babysitting. Though it only happens for a second, you can catch Lara Jean watching the flick Adventures in Babysitting at the beginning of the movie. If you haven't seen the movie, no worries. It's about a babysitter who must battle her way through the big city and track down the kids she's meant to be looking after. Though the plot is very different from P.S. I Still Love You, it still deals with the antics of dating, the chaos of being a teenager. We think this is yet another example of Lara Jean swooning for anything over-romanticized and trying to get her own life to mirror her favorite films. The Foreboding Lantern. In the second installment of the series, Lara Jean navigates a couple official firsts with Peter, including her first real kiss and her first real date.
Grazie.
Wow, they have big menus here.
The bigger the menu, the fancier the restaurant. Everybody knows that.
She dresses in a beautiful red dress and is picked up by her knight in shining armor. Peter comes in with a bouquet of flowers and takes her to a fancy restaurant, something Lara Jean says she had been dreaming about ever since she was a little girl. After dinner, Lara Jean takes the reins and brings Peter to what appears to be an impromptu lantern festival. She instructs Peter to write a wish on the lantern to be sent into the sky. The weird thing is, Lara Jean wishes for the very relationship she already has, which Peter is quick to question. She responds saying that she doesn't want them to break each other's hearts, as if she already knows what's in store for them.
I just don't want this to end.
You're thinking about us ending right now.
There's just a thought that popped in my head, okay?
We think that this moment is her basically jinxing their entire relationship and setting them up for failure. Lara Jean doesn't trust that a good thing can last and thinks that what she has is too good to be true. Clovers in My Eyes. Right after Lara Jean receives her handwritten response from her long-lost love, John Ambrose, she's uncertain of what to do. After many attempts at writing a letter and grappling with her feelings, she abandons her writing and questions whether she should tell Peter about this new development.
Considerate and adorable. What am I saying? I can't say that.
Directly after this moment, the song Clovers by the Brooklyn-based band Barry plays. For those of you who don't know this track, we'll fill you in. The first line of the song is, "I know where to go," which is what we think Lara Jean is secretly thinking at this time. Though she flounders over getting in touch with John Ambrose, we know that in her heart she already wants to connect with him. The general vibe of the song is like a waking dream with bright piano and simplistic guitar carrying the tune. Essentially, it is the perfect soundtrack to a blossoming crush. The chorus repeats, "Clovers in my eyes," which we think points to Lara Jean harboring her secret crush. As you probably probably already know the clover symbolizes luck, but it also symbolizes good omens for hope and love for the finder. Coincidence? We think whoever was in charge of the soundtrack for this film really got it right. Love knocks you off your feet. It's pretty hard to forget the first kiss between Lara Jean and Peter in the first movie. While on the track field, Lara Jean knocks Peter to the ground and plants one on him in an attempt to ward off her sister's ex-boyfriend. In P.S. I Still Love You, however, the tables are turned and Lara Jean is the one who is knocked to the ground. During her visit to the old folks' home, she's surprised to see John Ambrose and is so taken aback that she slips and falls. As she comes to, John Ambrose stands over her, much like she did with Peter in the first film. Though during the first movie, Noah Centineo, who plays Peter, amassed a following of 5.5 million people and was a fan favorite on the internet, it is in this moment that we see the competition between the two boys begin. Though John is unlike popular Peter, he is both bookish and charming, making life all the more complicated for Lara Jean. In an interview, Centineo said that when you have someone like John Ambrose up against anyone else in the competition should be afraid. Very afraid. And we couldn't agree more. Hufflepuffs unite. In her letter to John Ambrose, Lara Jean mentions that she thinks that herself and John Ambrose would be in Hufflepuff if they attended Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. For those of you who aren't up to date on your house history, don't worry, we've got you. If you're sorted into Gryffindor, chances are you're a go-getter. You're seen as pure of heart, you're probably brave, and you're definitely popular. To us, this sounds like the house Peter would be sorted into. If you're Hufflepuff, however, you're basically underrated. It seems to be the house for people who don't really have a home, but they find home in each other. We think that the fact Lara Jean thinks that her and John Ambrose belong in this category is nothing to scoff at. They seem to have a lot in common, unlike her and Peter, who are sometimes at odds. In her flashback of Halloween, Lara Jean remembers dressing up like French toast when John Ambrose went as a deviled egg. We think these two outcasts are pretty and perfectly perfect. Rock bottom. After Lara Jean finds out about Peter's history with Jen, she's totally and utterly crushed. She returns to her home and swaps her cheerleading costume for subdued gray sweats. Throughout the movie, her outfits are on point. She can often be spotted wearing bows in her hair, jewelry all over, and every little thing in its place. In this scene, however, things fall apart. Her sadness is reflected in her costume, and it extends to the state of her room as well. Usually, Lara Jean is the kind of kid that you would never have to tell to clean her room. When she hits rock bottom, however, so too does her cleanliness. Her bedroom seems to explode with unwashed clothing and mess. The lighting also reflects her mood. Usually the bedroom is well lit with fairy lights, but now all lights are off and her internal light itself dims. Her hair is unbrushed, and she even swaps her happy Fruit Loops for boring Cheerios. When Lara Jean is sad, the whole world around her takes on a shade of gray. After this, she engages in some light lip syncing as she drifts down the hallway, mouthing, "You can think that you're in love when you're really just in pain." Talk about teenage melodrama. Girls just want to have fun. After Peter and Lara Jean meet at the aquarium and he takes back the locket, they say goodbye in front of the tank of jellyfish. Though we could go on a mild rant about how the jellyfish could symbolize Peter stinging Lara Jean in an act of betrayal, we'll spare you this time. At this point in the film, things are beginning to turn around. Though Lara Jean still looks a bit disheveled, she starts wearing color again. Though her room is still a bit of a mess, her fairy lights get flicked back on. She grapples with honesty both between her and Peter and with herself. In the background, a cover of Girls Just Want to Have Fun plays softly. Though in the original version, Cyndi Lauper makes you want to stop what you're doing and dance, in this version, it does the exact opposite. The song is slowed down and feels incredibly moody, and yet still hopeful. We think this relates directly to what Lara Jean is going through. Though she's feeling down, somewhere in her heart she wants to lighten up. She can see the light at the end of the tunnel and just wants to dance again. Cinderella story. Throughout the film, we see Lara Jean engaging in one of her favorite hobbies, baking. And unlike most people who bake in clothing that might get a little messy, Lara Jean opts for more fancy dress and plays the part of a 60s housewife. We think that her choice to opt for fashion over function here is her trying to play the fantasy life she can't have. Though she fancies herself as some kind of romantic, is full of nostalgia for yesteryear, it all catches up with her eventually. In the first movie, she tries being in a fake relationship with Peter in order to escape her reality, and by the second film, she tries to hide her feelings for John Ambrose. In both cases, it doesn't end up so good for her. Her true feelings rise to the surface, and she realizes she needs to be her genuine self in order to figure out how to be authentic. Though at the end of the second film, she seems to have learned the lesson of acceptance, rumor has it there's another film in the works. We are eager to see where the third film will take us, and if Peter and Lara Jean's love will stand the test of time. Stay tuned. Did you notice something that we didn't? Were there any Easter eggs you'd like to add to our list? If so, sound off on the comments below. As always, thank you for joining us, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for future videos.
The way you look should be against the law.